Heat poured through every seam of the plated cars, turning the endless armored train into a rattling furnace as it sped across the Blight Desert. Even inside the conductor's cupola, where layers of iron, ceramic, and patch-quilt canvas were supposed to blunt the sun, Mara Reza felt sweat slide beneath the collar of her faded blue jacket. She had been born on this train, had crossed the desert so often that the shriek of flanged wheels was the lullaby of her childhood. Yet the heat still found ways to shock her. A whistle cord drifted back from the pilot engine ahead. 2 longs and a stutter. Junction coming up. Prepare to cut speed. Mara set her brass chronometer on the sill beside the observation slit. Junction 17, according to the schedule etched into her head, ought to arrive at hour 14:22 on day 140 of this cycle. She checked the dial. 14:02, 20 minutes early. She opened the speaking tube that connected the cupola to the locomotive cab. "Isaac, we're ahead." The engineer's voice came back muffled by steam hiss. "Tailwind. Don't complain. The sooner we unload, the farther we can coast tonight." Mara frowned. She closed the tube and wrote the discrepancy in tidy squares on her slate. 1 early arrival could be wind. 3 earlier this week suggested something else. She rubbed chalk dust from her fingers and looked across the desert. The track glinted ahead in strict silver lines, disappearing in heat mirage. Nothing out there except amber dunes, salt flats, and the scattered settlements the train existed to feed. The crew called it the line, but to the settlers it was lifeline, the only source of medicine, grain, ammunition, seed, and stories from beyond their dust-blown roofs. Since anyone could remember, the armored cars had circled the desert in a vast loop, month after month, year after year, a moving fortress that traded protection for provisions and repairs. Mara's parents used to say the world ended years ago and kept ending every day. The train was simply the piece that hadn't learned how to stop. The pilot whistle sounded again, brakes screeched, and the convoy slowed enough for the first supply ramp to crank downward. Junction 17 was a wide bronze turntable anchored to a chunk of bedrock. Around it huddled the corrugated huts of Broadwash, 40-odd souls who mined petrified algae for fuel briquettes. Children in rag masks waved as the forward cars ground to a halt. Mara climbed down with her ledger, boots clanging. Elder Jory met her at the ramp, gnarl-skinned hands already out for the parcel of antibiotics he'd requested last cycle. They exchanged the customary greetings, then business. 2 crates of briquettes loaded, 1 cask of algae solvent, 1 child, Amy, 12, coughing spittle, booked passage to the train clinic. Paperwork done, Jory palmed a rag over his bald head. "Conductor," he said, leaning close so the guards wouldn't hear, "is it true you won't be back this way for another 100 days? 89, by current route." She hesitated. Why? He thumbed toward the horizon. "Water table's fallen again. If the cisterns run dry before your next pass..." His shrug finished the sentence. Mara promised to alert the commissary car about extra filtration kits, but unease tightened around her. 89 days was already lean. If water was failing now, Broadwash might not survive until the train returned. She mounted the ramp, waving goodbye to Ami's father, and ordered the couplings released. By 14:39, the convoy was back to full throttle, sucking black smoke through its stack like a marathoner, desperate for air. In her cupola, Mara unfolded the master chart. It ran the length of the mahogany desk, a single graphite line, penciled into blank parchment, copied and recopied over the generations. The schedulers called it a circle. Mara had never seen a perfect one, but she trusted the older conductors who swore that once, long ago, They passed Broadwash every 92 days, Sharp Tower every 92, Gale Crater every 92. Each spoke set equidistant on the rim of a wheel. She reached into a drawer and withdrew a spool of red twine. Starting at Junction 1, she laid the twine over each plotted point they'd passed this cycle, stations 1 through 17, and taped it in place. Then she traced outward. Instead of overlaying the graphite loop, the twine angled gently inward. Not a circle, a coil, a spiral. Mara pressed fingertips to her temples. Wind alone didn't shrink a 90-day leg to 89, or spin a ring into a whirlpool. Something had shifted in the rails themselves. She reopened the speaking tube. "Isaac, come back here when you're free." The engineer arrived an hour later, coveralls stained with lubricating oil. Mara, meanwhile, had calculated numbers on an entire sheet of foolscap. She presented it without preamble. "We're not following last generation's alignment," she said. "Our path is bending inward. Every rotation grows smaller. If the trend holds, in 37 cycles, 3.5 years, the train will be threading tracks so tight it can't take the curve. We'll derail." Isaac cocked an eyebrow. "You trust chalk scratches over iron reality? The track's been there longer than our grandmothers. You think it's moving?" "Not moving. Cannibalized." She jabbed her finger at a list of replacement logs. "Look at what we've used to patch war damage these past decades. They took rails from the outer ring, our own route, to repair sabotaged bridges inside. Every time we're hit by raiders or sandstorms, we borrow more steel from farther out, and the construction corps lays the replacement line nearer the center, because that's where the attackers push us. Do that long enough, and you turn a circle into a spiral." She expected argument. Instead, Isaac tasted the inside of his cheek, then said softly, "I wondered why the compasses car requisitioned so many curve braces this year." He bent over the chart. "Where does this spiral end?" "The maps stop here." Mara tapped a white void at the parchment's heart. "The old scribes called it the cautery, a dead basin ringed by glassy slag. No tracks go in, no settlements, nothing." "Nothing's better than raiders," Isaac muttered. "Nothing is also where we'll fly apart." The engineer straightened. "You've shown me. Now show Commander Drexel." Mara blew a tired breath. Commander Drexel was chief of the train's militia, and by long custom, final arbiter of route logistics. He'd polished his life around one belief: the train never stops. Even the word derailment would raise hackles. "We'll need proof he can't ignore," she said. "Then let's get it." They traveled car to car that night, lanterns swaying as they compared maintenance logs, interviewed track layers, counted missing inventory. The evidence piled like slag. Each time the train encountered shelling from dune pirates, a bridge collapse, or the yearly sand cyclone, repair crews salvaged outer rails to mend the breach. Mara plotted every salvage site. The spiral tightened. At dawn, she climbed to the roof of the artillery car. The desert bloomed crimson under the newborn sun. Forward, the rails curved left, tighter than she remembered. She shifted her boot. The steel between the sleepers was stamped with a serial code she had seen only on antique diagrams. R455, outermost ring stock. The next morning, they reached Sharp Tower, once exactly a quarter turn from Broadwash. Clock read 28:07 since the last stop, not 30:40. Eldercath, handing over barrels of fermented yeast, told Mara the same fear. Water. When would the train return? Mara swallowed bleak honesty. 88 days. "What use is yeast if we're thirst-shriveled?" Kath asked. The settlement master's question hung in Mara's skull as she and Isaac walked the buffer decks to Commander Drexel's command cabin. They entered to find him cleaning a long-barreled repeater, fingers methodical, expression bare. "Conductor, engineer." Drexel nodded without looking up. "Make it quick." Mara spread the chart and her equations. Isaac laid a coil of R455 rail on the desk for weight and emphasis. Drexel listened, jaw locked. When Mara finished, silence pooled. "That's your theory," he said at last. "But you don't know the cautery ends us." "We know the curvature 2 turns ahead exceeds safe torque," Isaac countered. "The train will shear its own axles. Unless we lighten load, reinforce joints." "Commander," Mara cut in, "our plates already rattle like coins in a tumbler. The spiral keeps tightening long after hardware fails." Drexel replaced a bolt on his repeater. "I admire foresight, but we have immediate threats. Sand pirates, shortages, plague. This train feeds thousands. We can't suspend service to chase mathematical ghosts." Mara tasted rust on her tongue. "It's not suspension. It's course correction. Stop at an outer salvage site, relay those rails behind us, widen the loop again. That means slowing for weeks. Settlements inside will starve. They'll starve anyway, when we derail, Commander." She heard the edge in her voice and forced it flat. "We have 3.5 years, less if storms strike." Drexel set the repeater down. "We stay the line. Dismissed." Outside, Isaac swore into the wind. Mara felt strangely calm, the calm of someone who had pulled every lever granted her. The next levers would be harder. "Options?" Isaac asked. She checked the sky. "Tonight, we reach Junction 22. There's a switch yard dead-headed 5 kilometers north, rails piled high, untouched since the mutiny of '68. If we divert, we could scavenge enough stock to re-establish the outer segment." "Drexel won't order a diversion." "I didn't say we'd ask." Isaac's brows climbed. "Have you seen his brig?" "I've seen the math." She folded the chart and walked toward the commissary. "Find people who'd rather risk the brig than oblivion." By nightfall, she had 9 allies, 3 track layers who'd noticed the tightening, 2 artillery gunners weary of firing warning shots at raiders drawn ever closer to the train's path, the medical apprentice who treated Ami's lung infection, and a pair of stowaways desperate for any future at all. Isaac provided technical authority. Mara supplied the plan. At 0214, while the desert chilled to bone knife temperature, they met in the aft coupler compartment. Isaac eased open the floor hatch, exposing the linkage to the remote switch at Junction 22. A twist of wrench, and the cam lobe shifted. The line ahead would nudge right instead of left, guiding the train up the disused spur. Sweat prickled in Mara's gloves, if Drexel caught them. Yet if they failed, children like Ame would die thirsty, or be consumed in a derailment fireball. She reminded herself that tomorrow's fear was an ally, not an enemy. It meant tomorrow could still exist. The pilot engine whistled. Wheels thundered as the armored juggernaut charged the switch. In the moonlight, Mara saw metal jaws slide, heard the click, as the front bogies followed the new route. The train leaned into unfamiliar territory, creaking on tracks sand-swept but intact. "Done," Isaac whispered. "No alarms from the cab." They exhaled as one. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The convoy slowed. The engineer was easing throttle to match uncertain grade. Good. They were committed. At 0307, a squad of militia pounded down the corridor. Isaac yanked Mara behind a fuse cabinet as boots clattered past. The squad stormed toward the locomotive. Drexel had noticed the deviation. "Plan B," Mara breathed. Plan B was ugly. Reach the switchyard first, decouple half the supply cars, load salvage rails, and relay outer track before Drexel could drag them back inward. The arithmetic of momentum favored her. The commander would need to stop the whole train to reverse. but the rebellion controlled the latching pins in the midsection. Lightning decisions counted more than rank. The first switchyard signal post swept by. Isaac ordered steam reduced. Brakes hissed. In the gloom rose mounds of spiderwebbed steel shape. Rails curled like dormant snakes. The train squealed to a stuttering halt. Mara's rebels leapt onto ballast, coupling hooks in hand. A klaxon roared. Interior lamps flared crimson. Overhead speakers blared Drexel's clipped cadence. All hands, mutiny under prosecution. Secure your stations, lethal force authorized. Mara sprinted along the ballast, counting flat cars. Decouple after car 32, she yelled. Isaac tossed her the chief's override key they'd stolen weeks ago. She jammed it into the release. Hydraulic pistons shuddered. The aft half of the train, munitions, livestock pens, 3 artillery turrets, rolled back 2 meters, then settled on slack. 32 cars, a mere quarter of the convoy, remained hitched to the engines. Forward teams, load salvage. Track layers operated gantry claws, hoisting bundles of gleaming rails onto the leading flatbeds. Sparks spat into night. Gunners kept watch in case Drexel's men advanced. They'd loaded 10 bundles when headlights washed over them, armored rail cars trundling from the rear, militia climbing roofs. Rifles cracked, bullets whined off gantry struts. Mara ducked behind a pile of sleepers. "Conductor!" The shout came from Ami's medic, face pale. "We're pinned!" Mara peeked. Drexel himself stood atop an artillery carriage, repeater braced. He called through a bullhorn. "Mara Reza, surrender the lead cars, return to scheduled path, or face ordnance." She climbed the gantry ladder until visible. "Commander." "Look around," she answered, voice booming from the machine's magnifier cone. "These rails give us back the outer loop. Without them, we die." "That's conjecture. What isn't conjecture is the famine your theft will cause to inner settlements." Mara gestured at the salvage heaps piled higher than the gun turrets. "There's enough steel here to widen the curve and still leave surplus for every settlement. You cling to a shrinking path because it feels like tradition. Tradition won't keep the wheels under us." A silence. Wind scuffed grains against armor. Some militia lowered rifles, just an inch, but Mara saw. Drexel's jaw buckled. He swung his repeater not at Mara, but at the pile of rail bundles. "No mutineer dictates the line," he snarled, and fired into the charge cap of a stray artillery shell lying nearby. The desert blinked white. Thunder slapped Mara's ears. She found herself flat on the gantry deck, smoke clogging her throat. Below, a crater yawned where the shell had been. The shockwave had toppled rails across the ballast, severing 2 militia cars from their track. She spotted Drexel sprawled, bleeding at the temple, his repeater twisted. A hush fell. Isaac stood, dust plastered. "Commander incapacitated," he called. "Chain of command passes to next senior officer, Conductor Reza." Somewhere a rifle clattered to the ground. Mara's knees trembled, but her voice held. "We finish loading," she declared. "Medical teams tend the wounded, ours or theirs. By dawn, we relay outer track. After that, we send crews to every settlement to explain the new schedule and teach water-making so they don't fear the extra days. We widen the spiral until it is a circle again, or die turning it." No one argued. Work resumed. As crews muscled rails onto flatbeds, others assessed damage from Drexel's explosion. The blast had shredded couplers on 4 cars, but the salvage yard offered replacements. Even the militia helped, grim and efficient now that purpose reunited them. Sun rose, amber light illuminating a train reborn, a leaner spear point of 32 cars jammed with rail bundles, sleepers, fasteners, welding rigs. Mara rode the roof. binoculars scanning miles ahead, where dunes folded like frozen waves. At her order, the pilot whistle blew. Wheels clanked. The convoy crawled back the way it had come, but each kilometer crews leapt down, wrestled new rails into place along the outermost stakes the surveyor gunners hammered. Behind them the train laid its own future, straight and deliberate, diverging from the doomed inward curve. For 3 days they advanced, a creeping steel mill, prying up inner rails to reuse bolts, spiking fresh track on a radius half again as wide. At Broadwash water towers, settlers stared, as armored cars inched across brand-new line meters outside their fences. Elder Jory met Mara with a canteen. "You widened the ring." "We're going to widen it more," she promised. 60 days between stops, not 89. Help us lay pipe along the grade and you'll have water from the condensation stills. Broadwash's miners joined the labor. So did Sharp Tower's yeast brewers when the train arrived sooner than expected. Every settlement, desperate yet resilient, supplied hands, tools, food. Mara felt the spiral uncoil beneath her boots, felt hope, that rarest of commodities, seep into rail joints along with grease. Nights. She plotted vectors. Even if they rounded the loop outward, entropy stalked them. Rails would corrode. Storms would smash bridges. Raiders would invent new ways to harry. But now the desert was ringed not only by steel, but by minds alert to its decay. They could relay before shrink happened, build new circles beyond the old, maybe someday linked to green places whispered in veteran songs. On the 14th day, Isaac found her in the cupola, slumped beside her chronometer. "We've closed the loop enough for a provisional rotation," he said. Grin smudged with soot. "First schedule estimate, 93 days. Mara laughed, a raw, exhilarating sound. "1 day longer than the legends." Legends forgot sandstorms. And they forgot people. She stood, feeling the train rumble underfoot. Still endless, still armored, but no longer oblivious. "Sound the whistle, engineer. Let the desert know the line remembers how to grow." The pilot bell chimed. Far ahead, rails glinted into distance, not in a tightening noose, but in a widening embrace, a promise that the world might yet be big enough for everyone aboard.